2, 1. This is Chargers Unleashed podcast. Here are your hosts, Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner. Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, being brought to you by BetOnline, Charger Bowl Family, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, it's now day 8 of Chargers training camp. No pads today for practice, but that does not mean that Chargers Unleashed does not have a very, very special guest for another day of Chargers practice, giving us inside information. Dan Wolkenstein, if you would.
From camp live, immediately following, we are grateful to have the one and only Jeff Miller from LA Times, covers the Chargers for the LA Times, coming to us from Chargers camp. Immediately following, you'll get to see the green grass, the sunlight, the shade. Jeff's going to be talking to us all about the day 8 takeaways, some of his key observations, highlights, things that he's looking forward to, as well as maybe some of his MVPs of the camp so far. Jake, this is going to be a fun one. I'm excited. Jeff's a great friend of the show. Getting ready for the weekend that comes. Tune in for this one, guys. It's going to be a great one. Before we get going on the interview with Jeff Miller, we got to pay the bills.
Of course.
Our friends over at BetOnline. So over or under, how many times in a row you and I both will be on this show moving forward with hats going forwards and backwards? Collectively, I'm gonna go. We're probably rocking like 35 straight now.
Wow.
So how many more days in a row before that changes? From
creative segue, Dan. These are really getting interesting now. You're really making some interesting prop bets.
It's gonna be a popular one on BetOnline.
You know what? I'm trying to think of the last time that I did not wear a hat. And I remember you know what? I think it was the Daniel Jeremiah episode that we had. That was like the first time in a long time that I did not wear a hat. One of the rare times that my hair actually looked halfway decent, so I decided not to wear a hat. So in that circumstance, I don't believe it's 35 straight. So if the line's at 35, I'm pounding the under in that circumstance. So if that's the type of prop bet you were going to put out there, in that case, just give me the money now because I won. Yeah, easy money. But anyways, our friends over at BetOnline are still the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports contests and events with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, UFC, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information, from in-live game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet using the promo code BELIEVE50. That's BLEAV50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts.
That's going to be a great one. Jeff Miller, LA Times, coming up next. Well, we talked about it. Chargers Unleashed special guest live from day 8 of training camp for the Los Angeles Chargers. Jeff Miller covers LA Chargers for the Los Angeles Times. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, although if I'm so special, why did it take till day 8 for me to get on the show?
Hey, look, your schedule is hard to get to. Trust me, you're a busy man.
I'm only kidding. You're right. That's my fault as much as anything. So
I mean, he makes a good point, Dan. He makes a really good point.
It's true. We should have had you on day 1. I don't know what we were thinking. So lots to cover, Jeff. Obviously, we want to talk about today's observations from day 8. We got to see some things happen for the first time today. Press conferences today, but also kind of want to just go over your overall feel of training camp so far. Standout performances, things like that from players, and what to look forward to. But right off the clip, I think what's important to the fans and listeners and viewers now is day 8. You are there. You're live. You're currently there sitting under the tent in shade, thankfully, because it's hot out there. Yes. What were some of your kind of key observations from today? Highlights, lowlights, things that fans should probably want to notice?
Yeah, today was a big special teams day, which is a lot of times that's not very exciting. So unfortunately, saw a lot of kicking, a lot of kickoffs and kick returns. And the great thing is when people tweet out DeAndre Carter returning a kickoff for a touchdown, I'd like to point out that they're not tackling. So I could have returned a kickoff for a touchdown. It would have taken a little longer, but
I would have paid to see that.
The J.C. Jackson had his first interception today. It was in a 2-minute situation, and it was against Easton Stick. So let's not get too crazy about it. But it was, it was his first one, and ball got tipped in the air. He made a nice diving catch. So that was certainly a highlight. We saw more good stuff from Bryce Callahan today. He looks really good. I think if he can stay healthy, you can see why the Chargers wanted him, not just his familiarity in this offense or this defense, but also he's real sticky. He's real, in that slot. He was talking about going up against Keenan today. That's a good matchup. Those two guys have obviously played each other before, and so it's fun. It's fun to watch that. But he again, had a nice day out there. One of the highlights after practice was in the press conferences was somebody asked Bryce about covering Keenan, and he said something I thought was really clever. He was talking about Keenan's route running, and he said he's got some real voodoo on his routes, which is like, that's pretty good, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but I think I have a decent idea, and I thought that's a great way of saying it. So that was one of the off the field highlights. Was I thought he said that very well.
Jeff, I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what you were mentioning today, special teams drill, and two guys in particular, because I did hear this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Joe Reed was finally participating in kick return duties today. And I know with the reason of the Chargers obviously bringing DeAndre Carter in was to really primarily out of surface level be that return guy, but he's had a fantastic camp thus far. And as that fringe wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, and other guys like Michael Bandy and Joe Reed that are trying to make this roster, seeing Joe Reed kind of back on the special teams duty, which we didn't see much of him last year during training camp, finally seeing him back this year, and that was kind of his bread and butter coming back in from college. But what's been the overall feel just as far as that wide receiver battle right now? Because all of a sudden it seems like the Chargers are really, really deep.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Joe just with the numbers, but you're right. We saw him his rookie year. He had a nice kickoff return, right? Am I remembering this correctly? Didn't he have a game where he had a pretty solid kickoff return and set up a touchdown, I think?
It was a good kickoff return. Then he had his one lone touchdown. I believe it was against Jacksonville that year that he got. And then
jet sweep.
We never heard from him for a while.
Yeah. So we know he can do it. And he certainly did it in college. But that, if he has any chance, it's going to have to be in a role like that. But it's tough. You mentioned it. There's a lot of good, there's, unlike in the, maybe in the recent past, at least my familiarity with this team, is there's just a lot more depth. It seems like all over the roster right now, and you see that at the wide receiver, and something bringing in Carter. He's a guy who can play receiver too. He's not just a kick returner, so that's a different situation than what we had last year with this team. So. That's when Joe, they drafted him, we heard the stories about how versatile he is and how slippery he is and all this stuff that he can do, and we just really haven't seen it much. And obviously last year we didn't really see any of it. So that's going to be what that's how he's going to have any chance of making the NFL, is being able to excel on special teams. So it was good to see him out there, and he's had some good moments, but it is going to be tough for him. Just it's a crowded spot, and they're just there's only one ball, and unfortunately for him, he's down the list right now a little bit.
Yeah, and DeAndre Carter, Jake mentioned it. He's had a fantastic camp. I think he's had at least 4 touchdowns already. Talk to us about what you've seen from him in terms of where you've seen him in the offense. Do you see them actually utilizing him as an offensive threat? We hoped that we would see, like you saw in Washington?
Yeah, I think there's a chance that he is playing a decent amount on offense, and he's playing with the ones. He's out there, so that they're looking at it for sure. And he had a good number of catches last year with Washington, so they know he can do it. And another guy, real slippery. It's funny, he's my height. Okay, so which is a little scary when you see him out there. He's 5'8", and it's like the other day he's walking onto the field, and it's like, wow, that guy, he's small, but he's very fast and he's very slippery, and he strikes me as one of those guys. I think he's hard to get a good hit on. He's good at taking hits, and I think he's really good at avoiding just getting crushed. And I think, at his size, to be able to stay in the league, you've got to have some of that. So, but I think there's a chance we will see some of that with this team. The two things that I've kind of been struck with in camp so far, in that same vein, is we're going to see some different stuff out of the tight end. Gerald Everett, they've been running. They ran a sweep with him the other day, which is something he's done in the past. They ran a tight end screen the other day, which we hadn't seen before, at least in recent seasons. So I think with Carter and with Everett, there's a chance you're going to see some wrinkles here, and they're going to look at this stuff. And I think ideally they would love to use both those guys. I mean, utilize their skills in some ways that we haven't seen necessarily. We haven't really seen a return guy also be a big part of the offense, and we certainly haven't seen a tight. They're not handing the ball off to tight ends here. We haven't seen that recently, but I think there's a chance, like with those two guys in particular, they're certainly going to look at it. And I think some of that we're going to see during the season. Yeah.
And with those two guys doing that, and just want to piggyback off of that, like, how do you think that changes kind of the offensive scheme? Like, I know a lot of people were kind of talking about, like, there were some struggles the Chargers had early on first and second down. A lot of that was because they were unable to do the runs for much. Like, how do you see those kind of wiggly, shifty type of plays, with whether it's Everett, whether it's going to be with DeAndre Carter? How is that going to impact the Chargers' offensive scheme per se?
I think the idea there is you're just giving people something else to think about and have to worry about and have to plan for and study. And I think you see that a lot in the NFL where, with Brendan Staley, we know he likes this versatility and he likes being, having a lot of different options and be able to move stuff around. And it's all, on defense, we've heard about this. It's, it looks like one thing and then the ball snapped and it's something else. And on offense, why wouldn't you try to do the same thing, right? You're just giving a look and then running a twist off of it. So I think, in their minds, I think that's kind of what they're envisioning, that maybe with these guys, a couple of these guys, they can do some of that stuff. And in turn, then that would open up some stuff for Ekeler and, just kind of try to make his life a little easier. And just again, give the thing is in the NFL, we all know, right? One of the big things is give the other team a bunch of stuff to worry about. And that, there's kind of two, there's that approach. Then there's the old approach of here's what we're going to do and try to stop us. Well, I think these guys are trying to get that sort of where they're a little less predictable, a little more tricky. It'll just give the defense just something to put them off a little bit, a little off balance, and just then try to exploit that with some of your other bread and butter stuff.
Jeff, moving over to the interior defensive line here for a second. I know Sebastian Joseph Day had a really solid day of practice today. And Dan and I have been talking about this. The interior defensive line battle just for position spots is just vicious. You bring in essentially 4 guys in a single offseason between SJD with Austin Johnson, with Morgan Fox. You go out and you draft Tito. What does the overall roster battle look like for guys like Brendan Fehoko, Forrest Merrill, even Jerry Tillery, from what you've seen thus far out there on the practice field? Yeah,
you mentioned Sebastian. He had a pass. He knocked on a ball at the line of scrimmage today, which is we hadn't seen him do that yet. That was nice to see. You mentioned Jerry Tillery. It's conceivable he might not make the team. I mean, I don't. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But for a guy who played 70+ percent, I think it was 72, 73% of the snaps last year. He's fighting to make the team right now, and it could come down to him and maybe Fehoko, and good luck trying to get Fehoko to the practice squad. He's going to get picked up. Someone's going to take him probably. So they might be looking at that decision, at the end of camp here, and that could be a really interesting conversation that they're up there in the headquarters over in Costa Mesa. So, but yeah, it's again, kind of like we talked about the receivers. It looks like there's a ton of depth there. Now, it's weird when the season starts, guys start to get hurt. All of a sudden, we thought there was a bunch of depth at linebacker, and immediately Murray's hurt. Can't ready for the start of camp. Tranquil's hurt. Now all of a sudden, they're having to plug guys in there. Van Noy goes down, and now so it looks like right now there's a ton of depth there, and it's going to be tough, for a guy like Tillery. It's going to be tough for Fehoko to get a lot of time, unless there are injuries, because they've got guys who are really good and guys who are experienced. And Morgan Fox, this guy is he's going to be pretty damn good. His pressure up the middle. I was talking to Matt Smith today, the radio play-by-play guy, and he said, he went back and was watching some of Morgan Fox from last year, and a couple of his games, he had a ton of pressure. It looked really good, real explosive, and if he can do that from the inside, there's another guy who, they signed him toward the end of free agency. It was almost like a throw. Okay, we got this guy too, and that's a guy who could end up playing a ton, especially in pass situations. And again, that's, you mentioned Tillery. That's another guy who, he could be taking snaps from Jerry there. So it looks deep and it looks good right now. And we'll see as the season goes, but they certainly look a lot better than and certainly are deeper than they were last year.
I think the one thing that we hear a lot, and I'm a victim of this too, is, everyone has kind of the rose-colored glasses. Everyone's so excited. We all can go to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year. But I don't necessarily know if there's been as much talk about like level of concern or things to kind of look out for, or maybe some red flags that we've seen so far. Have you seen any, Jeff, like any red flags of like, if the Chargers don't fix this, or if the Chargers continue to do this, or if this player does that, like, are there any of those that come to mind that you're like, we got to just kind of keep penciling this in because I want to make sure this is fixed?
Yeah, there's nothing that really jumps out, I don't think. I think it's going to come down to injuries. I think the two things. One is injuries. Two is going to be the defense. And if they can come together and get on the same page, and then all those stupid cliches that everybody uses, but it's true. And the reason I say that is because remember last year, that was the problem. Remember early in the season, one guy'd go the wrong way and they'd give up a big run. And they couldn't stop teams on third down because they just weren't together. And there was that sort of learning curve that they went through. And I don't know that they ever figured it out all season because they were so bad on third down, and that wasn't something any of us saw coming. But ideally, if these guys that are now much more familiar with the scheme, that you'd think, okay, maybe that won't be an issue this year. So I think a big part of it's going to be them all coming together, getting, playing as one, and again, all that dumb stuff that these guys say, and we roll our eyes like, come on, give us anything other than these cliches. But that's what it is. It's like, is that defense going to be what we all think it can be? And we know the offense is going to be pretty good as long as Herbert's on the field and you got Keenan Allen and Ekeler, Mike Williams. Those guys, as long as those guys are decent, they're going to put up points. The offense is going to be pretty good. We think the defense has a chance to be way better, but it's going to be a question of whether they can get it all together. And that would be the one thing, that again, we all witnessed it last year. If that happens again, that could be a thing. Another one, and just to make sure we're talking about practice observations from today, Dustin Hopkins today was perfect. He was like really good. So the other day,
we're talking kickers.
The other day, when you said red flags, and there's no red flag with this franchise, like a kicking red flag.
Oh.
But he was perfect today, and it wasn't quite as windy during practice, so that might have had something to do with it. But he nailed everything today. He looked much better. So, my biggest thing I think is just it's staying healthy, like every team, and then I think it's just gonna be if the defense can fulfill the potential that they clearly have based on all the moves and all the money they spent and all these guys they brought in.
Jeff, I'm going to hit you with a little bit more of the stupid cliches that they like to throw around because Coach Staley kind of talked about this as far as just what's the difference really with going into his second year that he's trying to really concentrate on. And obviously he's given us lines like, we want to be a complete football team. And I noticed last year, and I'm sure you did as well, there was a bunch of more emphasis on special teams when training camp was around. I felt like they were putting a lot more time into that. And it seems like Ryan Ficken has been a little bit more efficient. The practices have been going a lot faster, quicker than Staley has been anticipating them ending. But just overall, in terms of him coming into his second year, what's the message that he's given out to you guys? Anything that you guys have been discussing as far as differences that you've seen that is moving the right direction to see like, these are the improvements that Staley's made already, just even coming into training camp as a head coach.
Yeah, you mentioned the pace of these practices is probably the thing that stands out to me, and I think a lot of that is just having these guys who know what's going on, and they in the off-season program, a big thing that Staley always emphasizes is that is all about getting guys ready for this right now. So when this starts, when they open up first day of training camp, he wants everybody to know exactly what's going on, and I mean to the minute detail where it's, here's where we have to be at this time. Here's where we have to be at this time. During this period, this is what we're doing. This is where we are. He wants guys to know exactly where they're going to be on the field at the exact time, so they can get there. And when they get there, they know what's going on. And I think that's something if you don't think about it, like that's pretty detailed at a pretty minute level. And if you don't think about it, you think, well, it's an off-season program. What are they doing? They're just kind of getting loose, running around. But it's so much more important to that. And this guy puts such an emphasis on the organization of it and having it organized, real crisp and having down the details that all these guys have it down so they know exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it. And then when it comes up, when they get out here in the field, they can move quickly. And we've seen that a ton here in this camp. And it's interesting. So far, these guys have not had one of those dead periods where a team, you'll see it where a coach goes crazy, or they pull them off the field, or there's some dramatic thing and everyone's yelling and screaming. They have not had that. And I think that's probably speaks to the fact that how prepared they are, how they know what's coming. There's not a lot of questions about why we're doing something. That's the thing I think that Staley wants these guys. He not only does he want them to know what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And that's just the way he teaches. He's such a great teacher, and I think these guys appreciate it. So now that I said that, tomorrow they're going to get yanked off the field.
Yeah, we're gonna see a fight from the right tackle for the third day in a row at some point. That's good. So you mentioned it, and a lot of people have talked about like the synergy of the defense, and that kind of being like the potential risk of it not coming together. But you've covered this team for a while. I know it's early in training camp, and we just finished day 8. But like, have you seen that synergy? Like, how does the defense look with this scheme in year 2, or just in general this year versus years past? Like, is that synergy there?
It looks like it. The big thing, though, with me and trying to watch this and try to envision what it looks like, it's so hard. The run game is so hard to evaluate on offense and defense in training camp because they don't tackle to the ground. I mean, these guys don't. I think some teams still are doing that, but these guys don't. So, there were a bunch of plays today where Austin Ekeler looked like Barry Sanders, and it's like there's no way you can tackle, but you don't know whether he might have got tackled 5 times before he got you got back to the line of scrimmage. Like you don't know what you're seeing, because it's just not real. So it's talk about the defense. It looks great, and these guys look like they know what they're doing, but it's really hard to sit here and say, oh yeah, they've got it down, and the run defense is way better, and that's where it's going to start with this team. And if the defense coming together is going to be stopping teams on the run and making them have to throw, and then you got J.C. Jackson and Bryce Callahan, who's been so good so far, and you got those guys in the secondary doing their thing. Ideally, if they can stop the run, so it does look good. It looks like they know what's going on, and everybody seems to be together. But it's really difficult to tell until they start to really tackle, and especially in that run game. That's where it's so hard to envision exactly what you're seeing. I mean, every play, you guys, every play you watch, it could be that might have been no gain. He might have got 10 yards. You just don't know.
You can't gauge an Austin Ekeler broken tackle.
Absolutely not. You cannot. So it's just. What I've seen and what it looks like everything with this team right now, it does look encouraging. Yeah.
Jeff, let's talk about some of the young guys. New additions, obviously, with the draft picks. We've all heard the hype on Zion Johnson, heard it on JT Woods, even going beyond that with Dean Leonard, Jasir Taylor. Again, only 8 days of practice, limited pad time, but who's really been the player that has stood out to you, or maybe even been like the best surprise of this group?
Well, I think you're right about Zion. Everybody seems to be on board with that. I was talking to Telesco the other day, and he said it literally took a practice or 2, and they're like, okay, I think we're going to be okay with this guy. So that's a good sign, right? And when the GM saying that, that's certainly encouraging. You mentioned JT Woods. It's interesting today. JT had a tough practice today. He looks a step slow, looked a little out of place on some plays. Ronaldo Hill, the defensive coordinator, afterward said that, yeah, he's hesitating. Like they've given him a ton to absorb here, and I think he's just going through that rookie thing where he's having a hard time processing and trying to play, because his whole thing is speed and covering a lot of ground, and I think they're basically seeing him struggle with that, which I don't think people should be freaked out about that. I think it's just a rookie, a couple of weeks into training camp, and probably he's out there thinking there's a million things going on, and now I got to do that. We know this is not an easy defense, right? I mean, the guys who've been in the league forever talk about it's complex. So for a rookie to come in here, he's probably, sitting at home, in a hotel at night, just thinking, what have I got myself into here? But the good news is, they don't need him to come in and be a starter right away. And what they can do is they can figure out between now and the first part of the season what he does well, what can he do, and then they can plug him in those spots when they and so it'd be different if it's not like Zion where they need him to play. Everybody else, all those other rookies, for the most part, it's like, hey, if we can get some from these guys, great. It's going to be some special team stuff, but other than those two, Isaiah Spiller is a guy who we're all looking forward to seeing, and that's a guy who, when you talk about stuff you want to see either Sunday in a scrimmage here or during these preseason games, that's probably the one guy who I personally am really looking forward to seeing. Other than just checking on Zion and making sure everything's okay, there is Isaiah. I mean, he certainly looks the part. And as long as his helmet's on, he takes his helmet off. He's got a baby face.
Yes, he does.
We had him on the show, and I was like, I think literally he's the youngest player in the NFL, isn't he?
He looks like it.
He is.
But I mean, he looks like he's got a chance to be pretty good, right away. So that's another guy who I'm looking forward to seeing, and who so far has looked really good out here. So we'll see when they start tackling.
We're wrapping up with Jeff Miller from the LA Times. Jeff, thank you so much for coming in and doing this with us. Maybe a question for you. Overall, who is your MVP, or who are the MVPs of camp? Whether it's the fans out there, Bolt fam going crazy with the Let's Ride, whether it's the podium, whether it's some players. Like, what are kind of the MVPs so far?
You mentioned the fans. So I was talking to Dean Spanos today, and that was the first thing he said to me. He looked up and he goes, God, it's like full again. And he was like genuinely surprised. And I don't think he was kidding. He was like legit, like, wow, they're back. All these people are back, and it's full. And so, and we've had these, fan clubs out here and stuff. And it's this team, I know that there's still this narrative that nobody cares about the Chargers. That's just garbage now. I mean, I tell you, I go to the gym and it's all, anecdotal stuff, but I see people wearing Charger stuff all over the place now. I mean, there was a guy I'll tell you this real quick. There was a guy yesterday at the gym. He's got a Charger, official, player shirt on. He's got shorts with a bolt, and he's got number 41 on his other pant leg, like the players wear, but it wasn't. And I'm looking at is that tight end they just signed? So I had to get my phone out and I'm looking. Well, it wasn't. Thankfully, it was not Sage Surratt. It wasn't him. It was just
Halloween in August.
Yeah,
it was just some random guy. But that the guy's fully dressed like a Charger player in the gym. So it's like, but there's a ton of stuff like that. And I mean, and I think it's Herbert, and I think it's Staley, and I think it's everyone saw what they did in the offseason. This is one of the most popular teams in the league right now, and everybody's picking these guys to do great stuff. So. I'm going to go with that. I just think it's the interest and the fans, and I mean it's been a lot of fun out here, and I think it's just going to continue. I think Sunday night's going to be great out here. This inter-squad scrimmage, I think it'll be packed, it'll be loud, and they'll really do it up. But it's good to see, because this team deserves it. I mean, they got a lot of potential, and they should have a good following, and they deserve it, and they put a lot of money and time into this. So it's good to see.
As you deserve the praise. Jeff Miller, LA Times, covers the Chargers out there live at camp, away from the sun. Jeff, thank you so much for helping us out today, giving some folks some inside information about what's going on there at camp. You can find Jeff Miller at Jeff Miller LA Times on Twitter. Jeff, anything else you're working on? Anything else you want to tell the great friends of Chargers Unleashed and LA Football Network before we get you out of here?
I'm glad you guys got me on here, and I'm going to not take it personal that it took so long, and I suspect I'll come back on like in week 15 or something.
Maybe the bye week.
We got to do better by Jeff in this circumstance, man. We can't let this happen again.
We'll make it up to you, Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy camp. We'll see you out there tomorrow, actually. Jake and I will both be there. We'll get some observations together, and stay cool. We'll talk soon, all right?
All right. Sounds good.
Bye,
Thanks, Jeff.